Hello and welcome to this live forum for the candidates running for Fresno Unified School Board. I'm Randy Reed with GV Wire. For the next 40 minutes, we'll be focused on Trustee Area 4, which represents the McLane High School area and its feeder schools. The two candidates seeking election to the seat are the incumbent, Christopher de la Cerda, and challenger, Veva Islas. And to get started, we're going to have each of the candidates take a moment to introduce themselves to you. And we'll start with the incumbent, Christopher de la Cerda. Mr. de la Cerda, please tell us a little bit about your background and tell us also what you feel you've accomplished in the time that you've been serving on the board to date.
Thank you, Randy. I am an educator by profession. I've been in education for 34 years. I'm also a resident of Fresno all my life, born and raised in West Fresno. I attended Fresno Unified School District schools. I graduated from Fresno State, and I come from three generations of educators. Education has always been important to me. It is something that I've strived for because I believe in education. I believe how important it is. I got on the school board and wanted to serve because I knew that we need to make some changes. In my years of public service, I wanted to bring my experience from the classroom to the boardroom. And this includes that every decision that I made it on behalf of kids. I have been able to bring a heavy equipment and machinery program to Duncan in our CT programs, and we've expanded that throughout the district, our CTE programs. We've expanded our early learning programs, TK, preschool, and we've expanded the hours of our kinder classes because we know that once our students get the beginning strengths of education under their belt, so to speak, they are going to continue to benefit in the later years. I've expanded safety across the district. We have technical programs that we expanded. We've even put in health facilities on our campuses because we know that health issues is so imperative for our region and for our students. And all this is done because we want to see a change for our schools to make them better and to bring them into the 21st century and leave behind those 20th century models.
Okay. Christopher, thank you very much. Look forward to hearing more from you on many of those topics this evening. Veva Islas, your opening statements and what you hope to accomplish as a trustee if you're elected to the seat.
Thank you, Randy. It's a pleasure to be here, and I thank you for the opportunity. I'm running for Fresno Unified School District, Area 4, because specifically I think that many of our children are not succeeding and thriving as they should be. When we think about the underserved, historically underserved communities, we are not really closing the achievement gaps as we should. So I want to work on not just improving our graduation rates, but making sure that our children are ready, college ready or career ready. And I'm running because I believe that education is cornerstone to creating greater equity and justice in our community. So I want to see children from disadvantaged households given the tools and resources they need in order to break cycles of poverty. I want our children of color to have a greater opportunity to go on to college or a career than to prison. I want to make sure that our children, regardless of their sexual identity or gender or immigration status, know that they are welcome and that they belong. So I'm running because I want to fight to create a change in our district.
Thank you, Veva, and we will definitely be talking about many of those subjects this evening as well. So the rules for this forum are quite simple. I'll be posing questions developed by the GV Wire news team as well as others that have been submitted to us via social media. The candidates are going to be given about 90 seconds to respond to each question, and if it's appropriate, I'll provide time for follow-up or rebuttal. So here's question number one, and I'm going to ask this one to Veva Islas to respond first, if you would. And that is, the current Fresno Unified School District's annual budget exceeds $1 billion. How will you as a trustee ensure that taxpayers get the very best return on their dollars and their investment in the school district while giving students the education they truly deserve?
Well, first of all, let me say that I believe that budgets are statements of our values. And that we need to make sure that we are aligning our budget in a way that is really serving the needs of our children and families. I have to say that when you look at the adopted budget that we have, it's over 200 pages. You know, I'm a college-educated, master's prepared person, and it is really difficult to thoroughly understand. So one of the most important things that we have to do is to ensure transparency and understanding. Parents need to be able to understand how those dollars are being allocated so that they can be part of the decision-making of where those dollars are to be spent. So I would like to look at making sure that we have a budget that everybody understands and that there is buy-in from all the stakeholders in that budget. So that includes the people that are within the classroom, our students as well as our teachers. I feel like they really are the experts about what we need and what type of resource investments need to be made. So they should be active participants in that decision making. And I think that on top of that, you know, we are relying on skilled staff who are preparing and monitoring. So I, as a board member, want to make sure that we're practicing fiscal responsibility and creating a budget that really is impactful in accomplishing the goals that we have and the priorities of our educational system.
Thank you, Veva. Christopher, you've obviously been involved in approving a number of budgets at Fresno Unified during your time on the board. So how do you go about ensuring good taxpayer value while ensuring quality education?
Well, one of the things that I know that I realized when I got on the board is, as a teacher, I always thought I would tell my teacher friends, you know, here's the cookie jar of money, come have at it, get what you need. And that was when I was in the teacher. Now when I serve on the board, I realized I quickly closed the cookie jar because you cannot do that. Our spending has to be thoughtful, it has to be productive, it has to be put to programs and support systems and look at some major issues. One of them that I've been championing and continue to look for is equity when it comes to some of our issues on the budget. A large part of our budget goes to employee salary. And then beyond that, we have to be very specific and judicious on where we're applying our support systems for our schools. For me, looking at how we are supporting our children and also making sure that the monies that we put from our budget into our programs, our support programs, whether they're for teachers or students, whether they're across the district, they are foundational so that they can continue. And they have to be thoughtful. Because one thing that can happen if we face a downturn, we're going to lose those support systems. And by virtue of losing those support systems, we're going to have a negative impact on our students. It's going to have a ripple effect. I've seen that before as a teacher in the classroom, and I'm very cognizant that that is not something that we need to set ourselves up for. And as far as our transparency, we continue to strive to make sure that we hear from our community in order to hear their voice and have their voice impact what our budget is.
Okay. Thank you very much. A bit of a follow-up for both of you now. Earlier in the year, as you both well know, the district narrowly averted a teacher's strike. But the new agreement that was approved runs only through June of 2019, and the process begins again. So how do you balance the union's wish list, the teachers' union's wish list, and other unions in the district, of course, with student needs? And I'm going to ask Christopher de la Cerda to be the first to respond to that question.
That's a good question, because one of the things that we realize that we've seen that sometimes we have to look at working out a relationship and what the needs are and being realistic what the requests are, because we have several unions that we work with. They're all valued employees, and we want to make sure that we hear what they're saying. So being open to have discussions, being able to meet with them, being able to reach across the board, so to speak, reach across the table, rather, so to speak, and make sure that we continue to open communication in order to do the best we can with the budget and within the constraints. But unfortunately, sometimes negotiations end up having hard feelings. And the reason why is because you're dealing with the livelihood of individuals. And I know that from experience because I remember at one point in our history in the district, we used to get pink slipped at summertime, and it was the ugliest feeling. So one of the things that I strive to not allow to happen is continue those kind of practices and making sure that we hear from our employees and that we are assured that we are going to make sure that we support them in whatever manner, way, shape, or form that we can. And our relationships, I think, they'll continue to improve because we are improving and we're striving to make sure from board to unions to representatives that we are creating a more positive environment because it benefits our kids in the long run.
Veva, how about you? If you are elected to the board within 6 months, a new contract will be coming before you. How do you balance those competing needs?
Yeah, I think that we do have to have an atmosphere of respect and acknowledging each other. FTA and the board and the school district, I believe, are all operating in the desire to best serve our students. But the teachers play a particularly important role. Learning and education does not happen without them. We need to make sure that we are equipping them by supporting them, making sure that we're giving them good wages, good benefits, that they are well resourced, that they have all of the tools and technology they need in order to serve, an economy and the challenges that we'll have in our growing world. So I feel that starting from a mutually respectful point requires that we listen to each other and that we're exploring the issues and concerns that are being presented to us. As I've talked to teachers, there is discontent. There is discontent because they feel that those individuals who should be representing them are not listening to their needs. So I want to make sure that we are listening and recording and that we're taking appropriate actions to respond to those needs. I feel like it's a failure if we have information and we don't act on it.
One of the elements in the contract that was approved in January was a side letter that discussed a working group to look at the possibility of a parcel tax that would help fund class size reduction. So two-part question. One is, how important do you believe class size reduction is to improving student achievement? And do you think a special tax like a parcel tax should be considered as a way to accomplish it? And Veva, I will ask you to answer that first.
Sure. Well, I feel like one of the things that we need to consider is the stress that teachers are under in order to teach the volume of students that we have. So reducing the class size, what has been demonstrated and what is proven is that there are better educational outcomes when teachers are able to dedicate more time to students. So by decreasing the class size, we can improve those educational outcomes, and I think that we can also lower their stress so that they can be more effective in doing what their passion and their mission is, and that's to teach our students. I think that we are faced with a lot of needs in our district, and that we should be exploring all avenues of bringing in the needed resources. So I would say that I would want to do a thorough exploration of what the parcel tax would entail. One of my worries is that I know that these are usually flat rates, and so I don't want this to be regressive, in particular in the McLane region where we have such a large volume of families living in poverty. So it needs to be something that's equitable. My other concern about the suggestion of doing a poll is the cost of that simple poll. It would seem like it wouldn't be that much, but I understand the estimate, it could be that it's within $40,000 just to do a poll that's exploring it. So again, I think a part of my interest in being fiscally responsible is that we are not wasting monies on a process that may not have some valid outcome to achieving what we want to achieve.
Okay. Christopher Cerda, please talk about parcel tax and class size reduction.
We've had this discussion on the board because, as you mentioned, there is a side letter to the parcel tax. Currently, I would rather not enter in it at this time because I think since 2016 we passed Measure X, which is a $225 million bond, and what we faced opposition from some of our board members. But I bring up the bond because we've begun to fund our projects through Measure X, with theaters, second gyms at our schools, vocational education expansion. But I also I'm bringing it up because I want to make sure that we keep the promises that we made to our voters about the utilizing our bond money prior to asking them for more money to pass a new tax. And I think that's something that's very important because I would like us to keep our promises and show our community what we're doing with our facilities and that they approved, because it's going to require us to rethink on facilities when we start reducing class sizes. And I have supported class sizes in the past. The class size reduction, we've done it 3 times, and I've supported each time. So moving forward, I would like to continue looking at that. But again, I think it's important that we look at the monies that we have right now, spend those and keep our promises, do it judiciously and impactfully, so that when we come to the time where we're reducing our classrooms, that we can also, that can be integrated to some of the money that we've already been committed by through Measure X.
Okay. So you mentioned Measure X, and I definitely want to talk a little bit more about that. And as you said, a $225 million bond measure that was approved in 2016 by voters. Christopher, are you satisfied with the current spending plans for Measure X and how that money is currently programmed to be spent, especially in your trustee area? And what do you see as the most important future expenditures for Measure X money in Area 4, as well as the district at large?
One of the things that we've talked about on the board since I've been on the board, and I mentioned it, the equity issue, is we wanted to look at worst first in our district, meaning the schools that are in need the most, the ones that are worst off structurally, are the ones that should be getting the money first. And so we need to continue to focus on that issue because we've done that in many ways. In fact, for McLane region, I now have, we're addressing our pool, which was leaking like a sieve. So we're developing a new gym, getting a second gym. Our media center, our library is being upgraded. We're addressing the needs of the stadium. We are putting in 2 new baseball fields. We have a brand new tech building. So these issues specifically to McLane have come to fruition. But it doesn't mean that we're done, because we know that the needs of the district and this older, especially in the older regions, are great. So we're going to continue to need the funding supplements. We're going to continue to need that to have an impact. So again, I mentioned bringing our schools into the 21st century, and that means bringing our facilities as well, because I've been in some of the facilities that are in great need. We have some schools that are just literally falling apart, and those are the issues that concern me. But we have addressed those and have begun to address those, and will continue to address those, and that's one of the reasons why I like to continue serving on the board.
Veva Islas, how about you? Do you think that the Measure X spending so far in Area 4 has been in the right areas, right place, and where do you see the greatest need is in your area?
Well, let me begin by saying that I think the need and why it was approved by the voters is clearly there. Where I think there have been shortcomings is that I'm not sure that those dollars are being maximized in the way that they were intended. Some of the facilities that I know we have been working on have actually been paid for by general fund monies. So I want to make sure that we're maximizing this bond measure because it was approved, and that we're saving our general fund monies in the service for students and things that are outside of the parameters of that bond. I think, we're talking about making these improvements to schools and facilities to help address, the 21st century needs that we have. And I think what we also have to consider are the 21st century threats. And so our facilities should be safe places for not only our students, but also for our teachers. So I want to make sure that we're designing and investing in resources that promote student and employee safety as well. So I would be in favor of, looking at things in terms of how we're designing the school, security, what provisions we're designing into the development in case we do have something like an active shooter on campus, how we can quickly get students out. Those things I think are very important as we're considering design and future development of facilities.
Okay. Along the same lines of how money is being spent, Veva Islas, I'll start with you with this question. As a trustee for Area 4, if you're elected, do you see your #1 priority as serving the needs of Area 4, the McLane High School area, or the district at large?
I do think that the McLane area needs a champion. It needs somebody who is focusing on addressing the needs and challenges that we have there. I think that there have been a lot of issues that have been raised where there has been inaction over the last 6 years. So I want to make sure that I am following up and responding to the needs that are being presented. I do think that we are working in a school system, right? So the decisions that are made affect all of us. And so I want to contribute to the decision making that is creating those outcomes that we know we need to have. We need to have children that are graduating who are prepared to be successful when they're in college, or that they have a pathway of opportunity into a career trade. So those decisions aren't made by individual areas, they're made by the broader district. So I want to be influential in that as well. So my commitment is to definitely being a champion and representative to the families and the teachers and the stakeholders in the McLean region. But in larger part, I also want to be influential and supportive district-wide.
Okay. Christopher de la Cerda, same question to you.
When I got on the board, one of the things that was very apparent to me is that this is a unified district. Although I live in and have lived in for several years in the McLean region, and I'm not a transplant of Fresno, I realized that we need to focus on the issues not just as a region, but as a unified district. And I say it because my children go to school across the district. And it's also apparent to me that all of our kids have an opportunity to attend any of the schools that they wish to. So for me, that was important. Addressing the issue specifically to the McLean region was also imperative, because I realized that we were in need of addressing those concerns. So for me, I've always thought, because as an educator, as a teacher, I see the students who come into my classroom and come across the threshold of my door, they can be from anywhere in the district, and they tended to be. So to think so narrowly as to address specifically students in my region. But having said that, I realized that I need to focus, and have been in the last 6 years, focused on the needs of our schools. Safety has been a #1 issue, and we've put on cameras on our campuses. We've invested in with our partners in the city with ShotSpotter. We have brought police officers on our campus. We have chaplains. We have improved our schools altogether. Restorative practices. We initiated that, and I brought that into McLean region because it was that important to address the needs and issues of our schools, especially through restorative practices.
You both talked about school safety, student security and all, and with the tragic violence that we've seen all too often across the country in recent years, I want to get more input from you on your thoughts about what are the most effective responses and solutions to keeping campuses safe and students safe on our campuses. Is Fresno Unified doing enough today? Christopher de la Cerda, would you answer that question first, please?
We continue to improve, and we're improving on what was not there, not existed, because we know technology is something that's helped us improve our schools. So to date, as I mentioned, we have officers in middle schools, increased cameras across our district, lighting in our schools have been upgraded. Also, it helps save money because it's a modernized lighting. We put in preventative programs like restorative practices, and the idea is it's helping to minimize the issues that we see, not only just safety in the classroom, but safety in our communities. And that's one of the things that I strive for as well, because as a teacher, I often worried in one of the schools I taught at, I'd see my kids go home into their communities, but there was still that gang violence, that the gun shots that were taking place. And I know that makes it a difficult place for a student to learn to live, and it's a reality. So by virtue of seeing having that experience, it was what can we do to make sure that we're addressing some of those needs as well within our school systems, to help our students feel safe in school, but also safe into our neighborhoods. And that's one of the reasons why we created these partnerships. It was one of the things that I pushed on when I got on board. I pushed on creating partnerships with our policing forces, with our community members, with community groups, with CBOs, so that we can work together, because the reality is, these are all our children, and these are our neighborhoods, and safety right now is imperative for us to address.
Veva Islas, do you think Fresno Unified is doing enough on campus security and student safety?
You know, I'd have to say no. And I think specifically in the McLean region, there were 2 schools where incidents did happen that were presented to the incumbent, where no action was taken. Ultimately, what happened was that 2 principals were removed for inaction. Teachers, part of the reason why I'm endorsed by the Fresno Teachers Association is because of the dissatisfaction with the inaction that happened in relation to teacher safety. So I definitely think that while we say in words that we'd like to do some things, that action really is what ultimately matters. So I feel like one of the things that we need to consider is that there are a lot of resources that go into prevention. When we are providing our children with the social emotional supports that they need, we can help to minimize what could be a behavioral issue that is then acted out upon. So I want to make sure that we're investing in the social emotional supports that our children need, and I want to make sure that we're listening to our teachers when they're presenting challenges, when there are issues that are being raised. We can't ignore them. We can't say that everything is fine. We have to be able to address them proactively. So having policies and procedures and resources in place is important. I want to make sure that there is accountability. You know, students should be accountable if they're doing egregious things, but I also want to make sure that those students that are acting out are getting the resources that they need to take corrective actions. I think our last resort is expelling or removing children from schools.
We're going to talk a little bit more about discipline in just a moment, but you mentioned specifically Mr. De La Cerda, and in his role, no action taken, you said, on an incident on a campus or a couple of campuses. I want to give Mr. De La Cerda an opportunity to respond to that. So you care to react or respond?
Well, I'm familiar with incidents, and it's actually not true that no action was taken. It's just that my role as a board member is not to get into the weeds and direct what staff is doing. So I met with staff, we discussed the issues, and I allowed staff members who are in position to do the job to do the job. The one thing that I found as a board member is our job is not to get into the schools and direct the minutia of what's taking place. We receive those issues, we receive what's the difficulty that might be taking place, and our job is to allow our staff and our employees and those that actually we hired to take care of those issues to do so. And that's what actually took place. This narrative that nothing was done is a false narrative, because I've been very proactive with my staff. I've been with the staff and at the district level and on campuses. I talk with teachers. I visit my campus frequently. I visit administrators and talk with them to see what's going on, to get the pulse. And I'm out in the community talking to our community members to see what they feel. So where this information came from or how it was entailed, it might have been because I'm not one to stand straight in front of everybody and say, I did this, because it's really us, and it's really making sure that those who are in place will address those issues and do so in the manner that befits the issues that are at hand.
So were you satisfied with the way the incident that we haven't talked about here in detail, but were you satisfied with the way those incidents were handled?
I wasn't satisfied that we had to deal with the incidents to begin with, the issues that, so my take would be, what are we doing to prevent any type of incidents of that nature to occur on our campuses? And that has been the push throughout my terms on the school board, so that we don't get to that point where we have these reactions taking place. Again, that's one of the reasons why I pushed for restorative practices, because our job is to keep kids in the seats, not on the streets. Our job is to respond and make sure that our classrooms are safe, that our employees are safe, and that we are able to have productive and strong educational learning taking place in our classroom and not have to worry about some of these more concerning issues.
And let's talk more about student discipline at Fresno Unified. Is the district using the right strategies, and you both have mentioned several, to address behavioral issues on campus, and I would say specifically as it relates to student suspensions and expulsions? So disciplinary policies. Veva Islas, let me start with you.
Yeah, well, again, I want to make sure that we're employing and creating policies that are giving all of our children an opportunity to take corrective action. I think that's at the heart of what restorative justice is about. But I also feel that what we need to allow and nurture are relationships. So relationship-centered learning, where there is these opportunities of dialogue that are not just about lecturing in a class, but really caring about the needs of our students as a whole. That takes time. That type of culture does take investments. It does take resources. And I don't think that we are meeting the full promise of what we have set out to do with restorative justice. I think we've taken some steps in the right direction, but I'd like to see us more aggressively fund and resource what is a budding restorative justice culture in our schools. And I would just say, you know, prevention is very important. But prevention can only happen when we make those investments that are necessary. And in order to get to prevention, we have to listen to the needs. And the needs are being articulated. What I have found in speaking with teachers, with parents in the district, is that, again, there isn't the action, the corresponding action being taken. So restorative justice is something where we do need to invest and act now in order to see it fully developed and reaping what we want it to sow.
Okay. Christopher de la Cerda, is the district using the right strategies to deal with student discipline issues?
Well, I'll agree with Ms. Islas in that we need to work on that nurturing aspect, because that is imperative. One thing I've learned as an educator is that when you start making connections with your students and with fellow teachers, some of those issues will start to diminish. And so part of bringing on restorative practices, what I had used that when I was in the classroom was to help that occur, but that's not all that we've done. And so again, to say that this hasn't been done in the district or specifically my region is again a false narrative, because we've increased our psychologists, we've increased our counselors, we've increased our social services. We've done all this because we're aware. In fact, just this last week, we're looking at suicide prevention because we've increased the number of psychologists. We've increased our Department of Prevention and Intervention program so that we can continue to build on the successes that we've had. And so it's not just a one-shot deal where we can find the answers. It's going to take us time. And we're dealing with some serious issues in our community. Look at our society today. But I will continue to push to make sure that we will resolve as best we can the issues that are taking place on our campuses, because again, in order for our schools to be vital, in order for our kids to learn, we have to have that taking place on our campuses. So it's not just one or two programs, and it's not going to happen overnight. We've seen the positive, we've seen the reaction, we've seen the growth, and it's happening, and it will continue to happen, and that's why I want to continue on the board.
Okay. Kind of a similar topic having to do with the dress code, and I'm going to ask you just for a quick response here because time is a little bit short, but the district recently passed a new dress code policy, and I want to ask you both, do you think it's too loose, too strict, or just right? So a 30-second answer on the district's dress code. Christopher de la Cerda.
Well, I think we needed to address the dress code initially, because I think we were looking at different times and different impacts. And so I think it's kind of like a choose your battle. In my mind, it's a choose your battle experience, because I think there's things that we can allow within reason, because we're still going to stay what we've had before. We're not going to allow certain types of clothes to appear because they might be inappropriate. Those things are definitely should not be allowed because they become a distraction. And how much of distraction is purple hair? Well, it just depends, because if it's not bad or having something etched in your hair, if it's not going to be a total distraction, then I think that could be considered okay. So again, it's a choose your battle. In my mind, it's a choose your battle, and so we allowed some of that freedom for our schools to make that choice. Do we go the reverse and bring in uniforms? That's not likely to happen.
Veva Islas, let me ask you that question.
Sure. My quick answer is that I think that we need to continue to improve our dress code. I do feel that some of the parents that I've spoken with have felt that the implementation of the dress code is not fair to young girls in particular. They find it to be a bit sexist. But I also just wanted to respond to the comment around a false narrative, because I feel like a false narrative is a narrative that continues to say that everything is okay when there are clearly people who are asking for change, and clearly people and teachers and students who are saying things are not working. So it is false to believe that everything is okay when there is continuing need and action being called upon.
May I respond?
Briefly, yes, go ahead.
I will be brief. It goes both ways. So I have almost 20 members of my family are in education, mostly in Fresno Unified, I pointed out. But I also have many friends and colleagues that work, and I talk to them, I reach them. So I can say, I've heard this or I've heard that. So it just depends on the conversation. So if I build on something and say, this is what I received because I've had 30, 40, 50 teachers tell me this. Or if you can have a handful and say, no, this is the negative aspect to it. So it just depends on how active and integrated you are with the system in order to hear those. And so that's what I do. I make sure that I'm listening to the teachers when I'm visiting them. I make sure I listen to see what's going on. And that's why I can claim it's become a false narrative. It has
This
been.
was just 15 seconds. Last comment if you'd like to carry to make one.
Yeah, my last comment is that I'm endorsed by the Fresno Teachers Association because they have lost confidence in the incumbent.
Well, let's move on to the next question about quality of education, which really is what we're all about here tonight. Are you satisfied with the quality of education of the students in Area 4? And what do you think needs to be done to continue to narrow the achievement gap, especially among African American and Latino and special needs students in the district? Veva Islas, let me ask you to start with that answer.
Sure. So a couple of points here. You know, I know that the graduation rate in McLane is improved and that we are achieving something like 95%, 94% graduation rates. But that doesn't mean that these are all children who are college or career ready. And so I think that in order to really serve our community, we have to make sure that we're closing that. In fact, my understanding is that only 3% of that 95% that's graduated is college or career ready. So there's a lot of work left to be done, and there is particularly a lot of work with special populations from our African American children of color. I am delighted that some of the LCAP funding was used to create an African American Acceleration Achievement Program. I think that's wonderful. But when you look at English language learners, our English language learners have the highest dropout rates and the lowest graduation rates. So I think there is a need to look at these special populations and continue to bring in resources that support and allow them to have an equal opportunity to graduate with an exceptional education. So I do think that there is more that we need to work at improving.
Okay. Christopher De La Cerda, are you satisfied with the quality of education in Fresno Unified?
I don't think we should ever say satisfied when it comes to education, because the whole concept of education is if you learn year after year. We expect our children to come in and learn and build off what they've learned the previous year, or in the previous day for that matter. So I don't think it's ever for us to sit back and say we are satisfied. It's always a process. It's always a growth aspect to it. That's what education is all about. But it's also making sure that we address the issues that are a need. For instance, our English language learners are not where Ms. Islas has pointed out. 73% of our English language learners are graduating. Some of them are doing better than our English speakers. So we're having successes. And so that's one of the things that we have to make sure, and we have to be careful, because if there's these lack of understanding of what truly is taking place in our district, then we're going to continue going backwards. And the idea for education is to move forward. Because if we continue doing the same thing over and over again that we've done and expect different results, that's the definition of insanity. So for me as a special ed teacher, I've always seen that we have to be able to be creative, be able to think differently. Because when I have a Down syndrome and an autistic child and a non-ambulatory, I had to reach the children. I couldn't use a basic curriculum. And that's the way teaching should be. You teach to the child, to the individual, to pull out what's the strongest and what's the best. And it's always changing. It should always be, the ball should always be in play, because we should never be satisfied with where we're at today, because tomorrow is another day and it could be different then.
Thank you both. We've reached the end of our time, but I want to give each of you a minute to kind of make a final pitch to the viewers and the voters. So we started the program with Christopher De La Cerda. So Veva Islas, you get the first shot at closing statements. So,
you know, I want to reiterate that everything is not okay. And 73% of English language learners that are graduating is well below the 82% as a district-wide. So again, everything is not okay. We do need to take some corrective actions to improve what is happening. I'm a child of immigrants. I was born into poverty, and because my parents did not have an opportunity for an education. I'm the first woman in my family to graduate from high school, and I'm the first person in my family to go on to a university. I am proof of the transformative power of education, and that's the desire. That's what I want to work for the 11,000 students that are in the McLane region and the 74,000 that are in the district overall. My life experience gives me insight into the needs and challenges of families like mine, and so I want to work on their behalf. I don't want children in my district to have to fight as hard as I did in order to get where they need to be. And so I think we can make a difference by aligning our budget by making sure that we are achieving what we set out to do in our educational priorities. I thank you so much for giving me time tonight, and I look forward to representing the students and families of the McLean region.
Veva Islas, thank you very much. Christopher de la Cerda, final comments.
We do need to change. For 6 years, I've been on the board and we've made substantial changes. Our graduations have continued to grow. Our successes for students who are entering college and career have continued to grow. More of our students are taking the SAT because of the efforts of Fresno Unified and making sure that that's accessibility. Brought on in our region, Design Science High School is now has a heavy truck, state-of-the-art facility. Duncan. Design Science is now at Fresno City College. Patino High School is the first of its kind in the nation for entrepreneurial schools. We do need to continue to make change. My life experience as an educator, not as a politician, and not as someone who's looking to go up the food chain in politics, allows me to make the decisions that are best for students, because that's all I've done as a serving board member. My decisions have always been focused on the needs of our students in this district, not just McLean, but in this whole school. And as an educator, as a teacher, that is my effort to continue, and that's why I wish to continue to serve and hope to have your vote in November. Thank you.
Christopher de la Cerda, Veva Islas, thank you both. This concludes our live forum with the candidates running for Fresno Unified School District in Area 4, the Board of Trustees. I want to thank both our candidates for participating in this important dialogue, and thank you as well, the audience, for taking the time to become more informed about the qualifications and the priorities of the candidates who are seeking to represent you. As a reminder, this forum will be available online for viewing through Election Day, which is November 6th. Our appreciation here to Jerry Lee, Brian Harley, and the entire team at CMAC, the Community Media Access Collaborative, for partnering with GV Wire to bring this candidate forum to you. And for everyone at GV Wire, I'm Randy Reed. Thanks for watching.